Good morning, everyone, and good morning, especially to our viewers using Facebook Live. In a few minutes, we will start the first segment or the first part of our PGCA webinar series, Family Rituals During the Pandemic, to be facilitated by Father Arsie and to be co-facilitated by Doc Julian. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Philippine Guidance and Counseling Association webinar series, Family Rituals During the Pandemic. Our speakers for today are Father Arsie Lumiqued and Doc Julian Montano. I'll be your moderator today, Francis Ray Subong, and with us also joining are the officers and chapter presidents and members of our PR board. A few reminders for our attendees. You can type your questions in the comment box of the live stream of the PGCA official. Then we will have our post test also at the end of this session. The link will be provided in the comment section and you'll be given 30 minutes to answer that one. This is in preparation or part of the provision for your e-certificates. So please be sure that your email addresses you have typed in during your registration will also be the same email address you will be using for your post test. So at this time, let us uh, welcome Father Arsie and Doc Julian.
Good morning.
Good morning, all.
Can you give me can I share my screen, Francis?
Yes, Father. Go ahead, Father.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Today's webinar is entitled Family Rituals During COVID-19. Now, before we start, I just want to do some self-disclosure. I work for the Center for Family Ministries, and I'm a marital and family counselor. I also teach at two universities in the theology department, Loyola School of Theology and De La Salle University, under the Formative Counseling and Spiritual Direction program. I also teach in another School of Theology, the Maryhill School of Theology. Now, for this morning, we have the following objectives. The first objective is to learn what family rituals are. Second, we would like to reflect on how to be able to maximize family rituals during COVID-19. And thirdly, to be able to creatively come up with ways on how to use family rituals during this COVID-19.
Father,
Now
before
here
we
are,
proceed, Father,
yes,
before
yes.
we proceed, by a request, can you please maximize the view of our slides? Thank you, Pa.
I would rather have it this way because if I maximize it, I won't be able to see the other things in my slide. Is that okay?
Okay. Sige,
Yes.
Father.
Now for references, here are my references. Rituals in Family Therapy by Ivan Imber-Black, written by two other persons, and Rituals for Our Times, and this is the latest edition, Rituals in Families and Family Therapy. Also, the webinar that I attended by Ivan Imber-Black, entitled Rituals in Couples and Families in the time of COVID-19. This was given sometime in April at the Ackerman Institute for the Family. Now let's start with our framework. I will be using the framework of the family as a system, and this is the framework that is being used by Bowen, Murray Bowen, in his historical approach in systems family therapy. This is also being used by in structural approach. This is also used by experiential approach and also in process approaches. Now, in the systems perspective, we define the family as a group of persons with significant relationships. As you could see, when we talk about families, it's not just limited to blood relationships. These are all the significant relationships that is affecting our counselees. So if we will be doing family counseling, we have to include all those significant relationships that is affecting the individuals in the family, and that's why they're having problems at the moment. Now, when we talk about systems perspective, we also use this diagnosis on healthy and dysfunctional families. This is by John Friesen. And John Friesen would mention 6 categories: the family goals and purpose, the boundaries that the family has, and this one is very much emphasized by structural approach. And the third one are the roles that the family members would play. Sometimes the roles could be very rigid, in the same way as boundaries could be very rigid, and so problems would happen. And the fourth one is on power. When the power is residing on few individuals, then there will be problems in the family. The fifth one are the rules, right? There are written rules, there are non-written rules, and rules could be also very rigidly imposed on the members of the family. Then we get problems. And then the communication. This is very much uh, espoused by Virginia Satir in the experiential approach. When the family members are not able to express their affect, then there will be a problem. Now, as you could see from the six, there are three R's. We have here the roles, we have the rules, and the third R is about family rituals. And that's our focus for today. Now, as you could see, family rituals are behaviors or activities. According to Friesen, rituals can stimulate both the left and the right parts of the brain. So if we are able to use rituals, we are able to balance we have a more integrated person because we're able to balance both the left and the right side of the brain, the cognitive part as well as the creative part of the person. Now, Imber-Black is talking about certain elements. There are key elements in family rituals. The first element of rituals would be symbols. As you could see from the picture here, this is a popular symbol here in our country, the cross, and also the rosary. If we go back to the early Christian traditions, when Moses and when he led the people to the promised land and they were having problems, some are getting snake bites. When Moses went to God the Father, to Yahweh, he was told, okay, create a pole and put a snake on that pole. And that became a symbol. Every time they would look at the pole, those who were sick because of snake bites, they get well as a result of that. So that's how symbols could be very significant and very meaningful. For the Chinese, we would see that there are mirrors that are placed before the door, before entering the house, and that's supposed to protect the whole family from any impending evil. There was also a time that we noticed that cars would have those stuffed toys hanging under the car, towards the end of the car, and that's supposed to be representing good luck for the family or the persons who are inside the car. And we still have other symbols that we could see around us. Now, rituals could also be symbolic actions, like what we see here. This is a young man here who is paying respect to the elders. So this is a symbol of showing respect. It becomes a meaningful action that we are practicing in our tradition in the Philippines. Now, during the pandemic, we would see in the newspaper, in the media, how doctors would be cheering the people who had become well, when they became okay after getting sick of COVID-19 and they recovered. There is a spontaneous cheering coming from the frontline workers, as if saying that we're glad that we were able to help these survivors, or they're also cheering for themselves that they were able to do a good job. Early on in the pandemic, we also saw that in Italy, people would be singing on their yard, or especially in their balcony. They are singing in order to encourage everybody despite the pandemic. So this could be spontaneous action that becomes very meaningful and symbolic. Now, rituals are also open. It is open and it has structured parts. What are some of the parts? One would be special time. So this is the appointed time of the family where they are gathered together. In this picture, we could see it's breakfast time. So that becomes the special time for the family. The second structured part would be the place. So this is the place that is appointed by the family for breakfast. It is the breakfast table. It could also be the bedroom. It could also be the sala of the house where family could gather. So a special place is the one that is appointed, that is selected by the family. Imber-Black also mentioned that there are 4 types of rituals. One would be the daily rituals. As we have seen in the slides earlier, it could be meals, bedtime rituals before going to bed. Rituals could also be entrances and exits. What do we mean by that? Entrances would be when a member of the family gets married and a new member is added on to the family. Exits would also be in the same way during marriage, when the wife or the daughter will leave together with the husband. That's an exit from the family. That's why there are even rituals during weddings when they would welcome the new member of the family, or they would say their goodbyes to a member of the family who will be joining the spouse. Now, the daily rituals, as counselors, we help the family to co-create meaningful rituals. In other words, as counselors, we're not supposed to be assigning a ritual to the family. So how do we do that? There are questions like that we can ask, like, tell me what's a typical day for you. And when they are able to um, come up with a typical day, when they tell their story, then the counselor takes notice of what a typical day is, and that's the family daily ritual. Another question would be, what is your favorite spot when the family is gathered? Then we would know the special place for that family. Or we can also ask, what will help you relax together, right? So when the family answers, then we would know this is a time where they they spend very meaningful time together as a family. Then we can suggest towards the end, why don't you spend 20 minutes more before sleeping, or 20 minutes more during breakfast, for the family to be able to gather and to be able to spend meaningful and quality time together. Now, there are tasks that we can ask them to do, like what I mentioned already. Why don't you spend 20 minutes more after supper to just enjoy each other's company, to update one another? Now, we also would like to differentiate ritual from routine, because routine are the things that the family can do together, but like they're watching TV together, but actually one is texting, one is talking to somebody over the phone, or one is seated there but is thinking of something else. That is a routine. Whereas in a ritual, the family becomes more creative. Like, for example, if they use TV time as their family ritual, then they can appoint a particular station to watch, or a particular movie to watch together. And the intention is really to watch together. And so after the movie, after watching, then they discuss about it, or even while watching, they're giving comments and discussing about what's they're watching. Then it becomes a meaningful ritual. It's not just a routine that the family goes through. There are also special traditions where more people are involved, like birthdays would be a special tradition, um, anniversaries would be special traditions, debut is a special tradition. Unfortunately now, because of the COVID-19, because of the pandemic, we cannot gather as we used to be. However, this shouldn't limit the family. Just because we cannot go out, we cannot celebrate anymore, those important events and traditions that we celebrate as a family. So what we can do is to use technology. Like there could be a Zoom celebration of a debut. Why not? You know that um, in the family can invite the friends and also family members to surprise the debutante, and they can make it still special despite the limitation of space because we cannot go out. Uh, Another one would be marking. It's a way of marking celebrations like graduations. We know very well that a lot of graduation, for obvious reasons, cannot be celebrated as it used to be. But that does not stop the family from still marking that important celebration of graduation. They can invite friends using technology like Zoom that we're using now, or maybe Facebook Live, in order to celebrate that important event that the child is looking forward to, and that's graduation, because that's marking an ending, a special um, achievement in the child's life, and it is also um, marking a new beginning for the child. So that does not we should not be limited just because we cannot go out. We can still celebrate together with the use of technology. In other words, the family can create something that is very meaningful, and together they can make it very special. Like the other day, I was with our group of counselors at the Center for Family Ministries. One just celebrated her birthday, and she was looking forward to the golden birthday. She's a golden girl now, and she was looking forward to that particular event the last 3 years. And the family, the husband, and the children knew that she was looking forward to that. Little did she know, she was already, well, she knew that it cannot be done anymore, but she didn't know that the husband and her children were preparing for it. In fact, they even had the program, right? They had the program using Zoom. And so there were people singing for her. There were people even dancing, dancing for her. They even made a video to surprise her. And so the birthday celebration still became very special. Um, People, family can be very creative, and they can uniquely come up with ways of celebrating a ritual, a meaningful ritual for the celebrator. Now, there are also holiday celebrations. These are outside religious calendar. It could be secular. And most of the time, this is in a given culture. Like my brother and my sister-in-law, they just celebrated their wedding anniversary. But because they cannot go out, what they did was, uh, well, the two children, they set up a table outside the house, literally outside the house, and literally next to a pool, a swimming pool. They had this rubber pool. They filled it up with water. They put the table there, and so they celebrated the wedding anniversary there. It became special because it was outside the house and it's next to the pool. So we can use technology to talk to relatives. In fact, they also uh, vibered us so that we can also celebrate together with my brother and sister-in-law, with the whole family, as they celebrate a special event in their life. It's an anniversary. We can also use new music. Like we probably have seen that the College of Music, sorry, the UP Medical Choir. Uh, these are medicine students. They were singing together while they were studying. Now that they are already doctors, they come together again for another music, singing together even if they are in different places, they sang once more the the songs that they used to sing together, and it became even more meaningful now because it's dedicated to people who are experiencing this pandemic, people who are suffering, people who are also getting bored, people who are getting anxious because of this pandemic. Now, sometimes there could be resistances to rituals, like Kim Berg from Solution Focus and Steve DeShazer. They were saying if there is any resistance, we can still look for exceptions. So this is what they call the exception finding questions. Like maybe the family would say, we're always eating together. It's boring already to be together. So as a counselor, Kim Berg and Steve DeShazer were suggesting we can ask questions, exception finding questions like, is there any time that it is different when you are gathered together as a family? Then they would be able to discover that, yeah, in fact, there was a time in the past that the meals together had been an enjoyable meal. Then the counselor can help the family find out what seemed to be different during that time and is not happening at the moment. Then the family will be able to discover that's true. This is an element that had been lacking right now. We can probably go back and to the time when it became very meaningful and enjoyable for the whole family. Now, family life cycle are also um, opportunities to be able to discover rituals. Like we have seen already, marriage, birthing can also be an important event because a new member is added in the family, and also the rite of passage for adolescent, midlife, and death. So as we look at this for marriage, parenting, having children, becoming teenagers, and finally the children having their own family, or the midlife and death, they are also opportunities to be able to celebrate meaningful rituals in the family, right? So this is from McGoldrick and Prieto of the genogram. Now, as we could see, the wedding, as I mentioned, well, we are hoping that there could be Zoom weddings. In fact, there are friends who would call me and inquire, Father, what about weddings? How can this happen? Well, at the moment, we still do not have means and ways on how to do the Zoom wedding, but eventually, I suppose, there could be also provisions or on how to do Zoom weddings. But baby showers can also be done through Zoom. We can invite the important members of the family, their friends, those significant others, and it will become even more meaningful if the children are involved and they can participate in the planning of the wedding anniversary, in the planning of a baby shower, welcoming a new member in the family. So for every family, it could be very unique, very meaningful, and they have their own unique ways of making it important for them. Now, sometimes rituals could also be in secret, in the privacy. Like, for example, for a loss, right? When somebody dies, especially if it's COVID, immediately the body is brought for cremation because of so they wanted to limit the infection that could happen, but that should not also limit the family from making loss ritual. We can still ritualize the loss. Like, for example, maybe a lost memory box can be placed where the family can write their goodbyes and they collect the letters that they made, and then they can make a ritual of saying goodbye by burning, just like what we usually do in a recollection or in a retreat setting. When I used to work in a rehab before, and this is a rehab for priests and who are having problems with their vows. It could also be addiction, sexual addiction, and also substance abuse addiction. Um, we used to have a ritual towards the end of the program that they will write all those people that they have hurt in the past, and then we go through uh, a liturgy. It's a ritual. We read scriptures, and then after reading of scriptures, then we go to the burying. In fact, we would go to the nearby cemetery where they will bury all those symbols of the abuses that they did in the past, and now they're sorry about it, and they will now be uh, laying them to rest so that they will have a new life. It's a symbol that they are marking. Last week, I was reading the papers. Um, the funeraria, there is uh, apparently now only 5 people can be invited, or maximum of 10 for family members only. And this is a very important tradition in the Philippine culture. So what the funeraria did, the funeral parlors, they would put a box outside with the name of the person who died, and those friends, they can just drop by and put their envelopes or their letters inside that box, so that the family would also feel that they sympathize with the loss that the family goes through. In other words, there could be other ways of ritualizing the losses and making it very meaningful. We can be as creative as possible. Now, for children who are mourning, it's important that parents would also not pretend that they are not affected because of the loss of a loved one. Parents should involve as much as possible the children in the mourning process, so that the children will also feel that it's normal to feel sad. We can normalize the feeling sad, feeling the loss of a loved one. In fact, particular story of this family, uh, that after the parents had explained to the children that the member of the family who had been sick of COVID will not come back anymore because the person is already dead. And it's a very important family member for the children. It's their grandfather. They love their grandfather so much. And after the parents had explained to the children, the youngest son, what he did was to get the favorite toy that he remembers his grandfather with. And he got it and put it on the table. And that was a signal. So the other members of the family, they also got something very meaningful that they remember their grandfather with, and they got it and put them on the table. And each one of them were doing that as a ritual. It's a meaningful ritual of saying goodbye to a very important family member, and that's their grandfather. So symbols would really be very helpful in helping the family let go and helping the family mark an ending of a relationship. Well, death would, as we heard from Maury, from Tuesdays with Maury, death would end life, but it does not end a relationship. But that's another topic when we talk about grief later on. Now, sometimes rituals could be very rigid, and we have to be aware of this. In as much as the parents would like to share the traditions or preserve a tradition that they have learned from their family, they are not aware that they could rigidly impose that ritual or those rituals among the family members. And that would have a negative effect on the children. I would remember, like when we were young, in as much as my mother would like to hand over a tradition, a very important tradition she learned from the family, like praying the rosary. You know, when you're a young child, and then you have to kneel, you know, the whole time. I we would I would always look forward to being able to sit again because it hurts, you know, when one is kneeling down, or sometimes the going to mass together as a family. Sometimes we are forced to do that. What happens is when the family members are forced, then as soon as they leave the family, they don't want to repeat the rituals again. Like when I was working in our school in Pampanga, we would have students who would, well, they feel that the class masses, so that when they sponsor the mass, is imposed on them, and so many of them they don't want to go to mass. You know, they feel that that's it because they were forced to attend the mass as a sponsor, as a class sponsor. So after that, they feel that that's it. That is already the mass for them for the whole month, not for the whole year. It's important that the family is aware of that. If the ritual is like dinner, that it becomes a pleasant experience for the children, and that they're given a choice, right? So, well, they can sit the way they want to sit while eating together during dinner. But what's important is that they feel connectedness with one another, like it's a going home together, it's coming home together. Now, because of the pandemic, we could see that there are a lot of coping mechanisms that is happening, like arguing with the members of the family just to fill up the void, just to fill the boredom, right? Or there could be fights that could happen, and we have to be aware that these fights, this arguing that is happening is just filling up a void. So it's important that the family is aware, especially the parents, to create rituals of sharing with one another how one is feeling, how one is bored, how one is angry, or how one is feeling depressed, or how one is feeling sad that they're not able to go out as they used to be. So that could be an opportunity to create a meaningful ritual of hearing one another. So what I just mentioned earlier, uh, this is a very important ritual, the storytelling ritual. Now in counseling, we know that narrative therapy is storytelling, and that's a very important intervention that we counselors can do. But even if we are not counselors, when we are helping a family, we can coach the family to be able to do storytelling rituals, like during bedtime stories. Like here in the picture, you could see the mother telling the child about favorite story. It could also be going through the old family albums. In fact, that's a very important ritual, going through the old albums. Nowadays, we're just home, so maybe we can look back at the family albums. And the adult children would appreciate that because they're able to connect once more to those significant people in the family's lives that probably they don't remember anymore. So while they go through the pictures, it's like also a genogram in pictures, then they get to be connected with those important members of the family. And it could be also a time of healing. Like maybe some family members, the children didn't understand what was happening during that time, and in the process got hurt. But when they go back to the pictures and then they realize, after all, there was a good intention. It was not an intention to leave them out. It's just that it was an event that time that the parents were not aware that they were hurt in the process. So going back through the storytelling, going back through the family album, it would be a healing experience for the members of the family. And that experience of storytelling could be different for every family. And so every family should be able to find a way of trying to go back to the past as they go through the albums and use it as a time for to connect with one another or to heal each one. Now, rituals would also have different purposes according to Imber-Black. Now, what are some of the purposes of ritual? One purpose of a ritual is to build relationship. So it's a relationship shaping and building. As they go through a ritual together as a family, they're able to shape their relationship. They're able to connect with one another, even if they're going through a difficult time. Then they're able to hear one another. They're able to support one another. They're able to connect with one another. So that's family individuals. In communities, like in the picture here in the Bayanihan, this is a way of also building relationship with the members of the community, right? They're together, they're transferring a house, in fact, here in the picture, and in this manner, they're able to show concern to the owner of the house, and as a community, they feel closeness. In other words, what I'm trying to say here is building of relationship in family rituals could be different for every family. It could be different for every community. I remember when I was young, I grew up in the province. Whenever it's lunchtime, we would get the what the neighbor cooked. We would get a piece of what they have cooked, and the same way, my mother would also ask us children to bring up part of what she had cooked and share it to our neighbors. That was a very significant growing up ritual that is shared in our little community in Nueva Ecija, where I grew up. And we feel close to the members of the community around. In fact, during when my mother's cooking and we need salt, we can just run to the neighbor for salt, and they're very glad to be able to help. In the same way, if they needed something, they forgot to buy it from the palenque, they ask if we have, and then we are also happy to share it. Now, another purpose of ritual is healing from losses and even trauma. Well, what is this about? We learned that stress is a physiological response to a change. When something is changed, there's stress. And so now, since we cannot go out, that creates a physiological stress. It's a stress where there's a physiological response, right? It could be irritability, or it could be due to the irritability, then the blood pressure can shoot up, or another physiological response would be feeling not wanting to get out from the bed. It's a physiological response to the stress. And we also see, from according to Bishop 2020, fear is a response to an immediate threat, right? So when there's an immediate threat, like for example, there's a lion in front of you, then there's fear because of the immediate threat. And anxiety is differentiated from stress and fear because anxiety is a long-term threat, right? It's a long-term threat. We know very well that at the beginning of the pandemic, people would panic. They would panic and they would rush to the mall before the the ECQ happened, and they tried to buy as much as they could because people are uncertain how long will this be, and we would even hear those stories where people would, well, department store or groceries would run out of tissue paper. And so people with money, they would panic and buy. And those without money, they would just continue to panic because there's a lot of uncertainty. We don't know what will happen next. And by panicking, it creates a temporary relief. We know of that story of that lady who, because of panicking, she pressed the wrong button while ordering things online, only to find out that she ordered one room filled with tissue paper, and she didn't know how to dispose of the tissue paper, and it was due to panic that she just pushed the wrong button. And another result would be, another term here is depression. When there's a lot of anger, we know very well, when the anger is turned towards the self, then the depression could happen. It's the person's difficulty to be able to manage the stress, the fear, and the anxiety. However, they're not all bad after all. Stress, fear, anxiety could also create hypervigilance on the members of the family. In other words, because of this stress, this fear, and anxiety that is created by this pandemic, this helps us to evolve into a person who is more resilient. At breakfast this morning in my community here of priests, we were talking about the, the latest news that was given by WHO that apparently, even if there is a vaccine, we will be experiencing this pandemic up to, they're projecting 5 years. And so we were saying, well, the 5 years, probably people would evolve, people would adapt, uh, we will become more resilient after that. And so that's the good thing. When there's stress and fear and anxiety, we, some of us will become resilient, and we would like that it will not be some of us, but all of us as a family. If we are able to do family rituals together, and the whole family can end up resilient as a result. Well, another purpose of rituals, family rituals, would be talking about memories, right? So the family together, as I mentioned, in the going back through the old picture albums, that could be a ritual where they can talk about those people that were significant in their lives that are probably gone. Or it could also be the family can also organize a ritual to provide support to contain the strong emotions. Like, for example, a strong emotion of anger, the strong emotion of anxiety, the strong emotion of boredom. And this can be facilitated by parents. So parents can initiate this important family ritual where they can talk about their feelings. They can talk about memories of people who pass away. They can talk about memories of how their lives were before the pandemic. And they can highlight what is also present now, what they have now. Despite pandemic, they have time to be gathered together. Like my brother, if I may go back to his story, during the pandemic, they chose to stay in Angeles because their house here in Pasig is close to a clinic. So they were, my brother and sister-in-law, they were thinking of protecting my nephew and niece. So there's a house that is still unsold by the one of the siblings of my uh, um, my sister-in-law, the wife of my brother. So they're staying there. All of a sudden, they're in a new place, but it's a big place in a subdivision where people can walk around. So what my brother did was to start a ritual. What's that ritual? He was teaching my nephew and niece how to drive, and they would even show us videos of how my my nephew and niece would park the car. So he would put those um, those orange cones that is used for traffic. They're supposed to park and not hit the cone. And they would show us through video how proudly my nephew and my niece would show how they park well the car. So it became a family ritual between father and son, father and daughter driving, and they would also walk together in the morning together with their dog. They brought along with them their dog, and the dog would walk with them. And the dog, in fact, after eating, the dog would run back to the house and would not want to be left outside. So even the dog is feeling oneness with the family inside the house. Now, another purpose of ritual is an expression of belief. Rituals could be a way to facilitate transmission of values and belief system. As we could see here, this is a very important ritual in the Visayas region and even, I guess, in the whole Philippines, the Santo Niño, the Sinulog of Cebu. It's a festival. It's how the family is able to transmit particular values and belief system. So during this pandemic that the family is together, this is the time where if the parents were busy at work, now that they are working at home, this is now the time that instead of the katulong, instead of manang who is supervising the children, now it's father and mother who can now supervise the children, especially with the transmission of values that they wanted to teach their children and also transmission of beliefs. So we can maximize the time to be able to transmit those beautiful values that the parents were not able to do before this pandemic because they're busy with so many other things. Now that they are together, this is now the time that the family members, the parents, will be able to teach the family members those values that they hold very precious, beliefs that they feel are important to them. Now, another purpose of a ritual would be to affirm and to celebrate. Like in this picture, this is Christmas time, and the family is for during Christmas. This is a reunion for a family. It's marking the ending of a year, marking the uh, here and a new member of the family added during that year. So it can be an affirmation that even if they went through a lot of difficulties, they're still together, right? And that they're able to manage together. So rituals could make changes manageable, um, even if there were difficulties in the past, that the family were able to go through it all together. So they are now able to highlight the changes that happened that they were able to manage, and so they can celebrate that they were able to go through it together despite those challenges. So they're affirming one another through that ritual. Another ritual, which I also mentioned that my brother and his children would do, is walking together holding hands. According to Friesen, rituals could contribute to family identity. You know, as the family, even if they're just seated together in the sala, they hold hands. You know, the kinesthetic part, which is very important, that they feel that, I understand you are bored at the moment, but I'm here. So just simply holding hands without even saying anything, that's identity building, that I am not alone. I am with the very important, significant persons to me. Even if I am afraid, I'm feeling not alone. Even if I have a lot of uncertainties at the moment, but we can go through it together without saying anything, by just holding hands and showing concern with one another is already a ritual building or family identity building ritual. Another purpose of a family ritual is do a to do a family meeting, like here in the picture. Uh, During meetings, this is the time when they can discuss together who will do what, right? So they can follow up on some of the maybe the tasks that are supposed to be done. Yesterday, while I was facilitating um, a support group for our counselors at CEFAM, one was sharing that she got sick because she was not taking care of herself. But during the time of sickness, then she realized that she can actually ask help from her husband, who is very glad to be able to help. It's just maybe they're not as super efficient as how she would do things, but because she was sick, they were just willing to help. Maybe not as I said, immaculately clean as she would used to do things, but uh, they can still share doing rituals of washing dishes, rituals of um, watering the plants, rituals of cooking even, right? The whole family, they can plan for that, So during meetings, it's here is a time for family to be able to express their beliefs about how decisions are being made in the family and who is included in the decision-making process. This is a very important time that the family will be able to discuss certain difficulties, or they can do planning on what's the new ritual that they can introduce as a family, an important meaningful activity that they can do as a family. They can plan together during ritual. What is important here is that they are able to give importance to every member of the family, that each member of the family would feel that they are included in the decision making, that nobody is left out. Well, that ends my sharing for today on family rituals during the time of COVID-19. Here are some of the references. Okay, we will now open the floor for any questions or clarifications. Dr. Julian, would there be questions on the floor?
We would
We
like
are
to
now
ask,
waiting. Yes.
yes,
Yes, Francis.
we would like to ask our participants to type in their questions or clarifications sa ating comment box. If you have any clarifications or uh,
Questions?
questions.
Probably some people would ask, what about religious like us? While we're waiting for questions. Like
Yes,
us, religious, how important are rituals? During the earlier part of the pandemic, uh, there was a question that was raised. Are we still, well, the structure of the place where I live is, we are in the provincialate is across the street of our elderly home. We used to live together here in the provincialate where I am staying here in New Manila. But when our elderly home was built, our elderly priest had to transfer there. But since we're so used to being together, there was an appointed day that every Sundays we would gather together. We would have pre-prandials. That means we gather together before lunch. We would have chat and we would have fingered food and so on. So at the earlier part of the pandemic, especially when social distancing was very strictly imposed, we were saying, how do we do that? Should we stop our going to the other side? I said, no, that's an important tradition that we have. That's an important ritual. Good na lang that time I was reading about rituals already. So I was telling our Father Provincial, we should not stop that particular important ritual because our elderly priests are looking forward to that Sunday because that's the only time they will meet other, well, younger priests in their community, because we would just cross the street and we would join them. In fact, during the Holy Week, we had an Easter Triduum. That's the 3 days before Easter. We would gather together in our elderly homes. We make sure that there is social distancing, but we would have our mass together. We would go through the different rituals during the Holy Thursday, Friday, and then Sunday as we welcome Easter. And it was a very enjoyable event for the whole community of our elderly priests. They don't feel that they are alone because we would visit them. We would go to their place. That's how religious like us would have rituals celebrated together. Yes, Dr. Julian. Dr. Julian, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay, here you are.
Yes.
Father, the first question is, how can parents manage children in time of pandemic since they cannot go out,
Yes,
much unlike before?
correct. Like the example that I gave earlier about my brother, they're in a new place in Pampanga. So what he did was he organized driving lessons. He bought this rubber pool where they would be together as a family, even if the water is not really deep, but it's a time for bonding together as a family. They would walk the dog, right? And it becomes a very important ritual, which they were not able to do when they were here before the pandemic in Pasig, because my brother and my sister are both working. So only the helper is left with the children. Now that they are together, they have a lot of time to bond together and create rituals that they missed doing before the pandemic.
Yes, Father. Thank you. It seems that we really have to be creative
Yes.
in thinking of ideas, and I think there are a lot of things that we can do: draw, dance, sing, and the most important thing I think is that we do it together with them.
Yes. In fact, I received a TikTok. My 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 the family of my brother, because it's the only one with children among us. I'm a priest, and my other sister is not married. The other one is married but without children. So they created this TikTok. They would have steps, right? It was started by my niece, and then my brother, and then my nephew, and then the wife of my brother, and including the dog. So they were doing the same movements, including their dog. So it was an enjoyable ritual doing TikTok as a family,
Correct. Yes.
and sharing it to us.
Mhm. Here's another question, Father.
Yes.
What possible topics can be possibly discussed for family meetings with children below 11 years old?
Oh, well, what I can think of at the moment is children below 11 years
11
old in
years.
a family meeting. They can ask how they are feeling during that time. Maybe they are not used to being asked, but this is the time during the family meeting where the 11-year-old or the 10-year-old or the 9-year-old can be included in sharing how they feel. In fact, in one of my family counseling, when I asked a couple to bring their child with them, they were so surprised. They were saying, "But father, he's only 4 years old." I said, "Even if he's only 4 or 5 years old, just bring him along." And they were really surprised. After the child joined our counseling session, when he started to warm up, he was sharing what he observed because the parents thought, he's very young boy, and he does not know what's happening in the family. But when he started to talk, he said, "What have you observed?" I asked him, "What have you observed? Anong naobserbahan mo with your mother and father?" And the boy said, sila, inom sila. Tapos mamaya, away sila. And the parents were dumbfounded. They thought that wala namang kamalay-malay itong bata. They don't know what's happening. But he was very observant. So in that meeting, together with me in family counseling, he was sharing with the mother and father what he observed. And that was a very big, it created a very big impact on the father and the mother, that when they fight, they should not be fighting in front of the child, because the child, they thought, is only 4 year old. He was so observant, and he knows what is happening. And he was observing, and without them knowing it, they're transmitting a negative value to the child.
Yes, yes. Yes, that Father, that reminds me something that a child psychologist told me once,
Yeah,
that really also, especially in this pandemic period, our children are also very sensitive, and they can also feel the stress that we ourselves are experiencing,
correct.
and therefore also the stress in our relationships.
Uh,
So it's good also to know our stress, how we are, and
yes,
then also work with them.
correct. It's just a matter of really the parents initiating how they're feeling, and the child would realize, oh, I'm not the only one feeling strange. So the child would feel, hindi naman pala strange. My parents are also feeling the same way. So it opens an avenue for the children, for the young children, to be able to share how they're feeling. Another meeting that can be done is like, maybe they can think of like baking. My my niece is baking, but well, she's it becomes a family ritual together. So somebody prepares the the the, the things that they need for the baking. Somebody would do the dough, and then somebody would add the whatever fruit they wanted to add in the what they will be baking. So it becomes a happy ritual that they come up with, and and then they discuss about it. So in a meeting, they would say, "Oh, what else are we going to do?" So all of a sudden, my brother and sister-in-law, they discovered that their children, the two children, they have talents that they never thought when during the before the pandemic, that they they knew a lot of things. And this is the time now that they are able to discover the talents of their children, and it becomes a very meaningful family ritual that they do together.
Mhm. Father, there's another question.
Yes.
That wait, just a minute, it just moved. Another question of another about another generation, naman.
Yes.
So, uh, we are asking about the senior citizens.
Yes.
How about managing seniors who are also prone to frustrations, fears, and anxiety, feeling helpless in this pandemic?
Well, I can share our, we have a lot of seniors here in the other house. What we do together as an activity that becomes very meaningful for them, we just finish packing the food to be given to the disadvantaged members of our parish in Caloocan. So what we did is even our seniors, they would join us just packing, like putting the mongo in plastic, tying it, right? Or another one is helping in just putting the canned goods into the bigger pack, and it becomes a happy ritual among our elderly together with our young seminarians, because our young seminarians would also help because they're stronger. They will be the one carrying those 5 kilos of rice in the food pack. So each one, according to his capability, would do a particular task, and it becomes very meaningfully done. So the boredom, all of a sudden, there's something new that we would be doing. It's not only helping the people who will receive the food packs, but it's also helping ourselves, even our elderly priests, to feel that even at this age, they are still useful members of the community, that they can still do something that can also help the bigger members of the community through our parish.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Father. More questions. There are more questions here.
Yeah.
So, ito naman is also another generation. So
Yeah.
some students may not be comfortable being with some students may not be comfortable being with their families because of pre-existing problems,
Correct.
and sometimes the very same family members are the triggers of their anxiety or depression, and
Yes.
they are forced to be together because of quarantine. What's
Yes.
the best way to help them?
Okay. Well, of course, one is family counseling, but in the absence of family counseling, the parents would be the one to initiate, to be able to help them talk about what caused the difficulty, or what created the animosity between the two children. Uh, it's the parent who should be very keen, use their skills here to be able to help the the children express what caused the anxiety between each other, what caused the hurt between each other, what caused the animosity between one another, and that they are able to talk about it. So it becomes a family meeting, in fact, being facilitated by the parents, so that they will be able to share what they are feeling. As I mentioned earlier, because of the pandemic, part of the coping is getting angry, bring out the frustrations to the members of the family. But if the parents and the children, together with the children, would realize that this is just a coping mechanism, that there are ways of expressing themselves in a more functional way, in a more healthy manner, then it becomes a family ritual of discovering and reaching out to one another. I am checking papers right now in my online classes, and one particular student was telling me that he and his brother were fighting most of the time, but because of poverty, one brother had to be had to live with another relative. And that's the time he started to miss his brother. When they were together, they would always fight. There's no day that they will not fight. They would always fight. But when they were separated, then he realized that he misses his brother. So when after some time, when the brother came back, they became the closest. In fact, he's his closest brother. Right now, he's already a seminarian. Whenever he goes home, his brother would make it a point to visit him, and his brother would be very glad. The brother is already married, would be glad to bring him to his family, and they became very close friends, and they're now the best of friends afterwards.
Thank you, Father.
Yeah.
Another one. I think we have more time.
Yes.
This one here is, how can rituals be established into the lives of children, students, not living with their parents or families, especially the abused ones?
Yes.
Can it be established with other groups?
Yeah. Well, definitely. With abuse patients or abuse clients, they're staying usually with another member or other members of the family, not members of the family. They are staying in a rehabilitation center, but there's still a mother figure and a father figure in centers who will act as good role mother, role good roles, father role or mother role to the children in the center. And definitely during in that place, they can still have a ritual, even if they were hurting because of the abuse that happened. Now with the good role models, good mother figure, good father figure, they would realize that after all, humanity is not that bad. I mean, that there are also people who are good, and they can trust once more through this important father figure or mother figure in the center that they are living together with the other children. And I have a thesis writer, a mentee who's writing about the feelings and images of children who are abused. So he had this chosen this particular center, and he was very surprised that the children who are abused, sexually abused, they would have important symbols. And they have symbols because his thesis is about images of God, and their images of God are very unique to each child, right? And he was so amazed to be able to discover that in his research, that even how much abuse they went through in the past, life goes on and life continues despite the abuse that happened. There is life after the abuse.
So, Father, it's really the importance of really establishing and nurturing that sense of security with your caregiver,
Yeah,
with a person.
the new significant
Really.
other.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, another question. Here, it's about a mother.
Yes.
What is the best ritual you may recommend to a family where me myself, the mother, is feeling not okay during this pandemic?
Yeah.
Natatakot ako bigla to think what lies ahead of us.
Correct. And that's the anxiety provoking situation because we don't know what will happen in the future. Um, for the mother to be able to share her fears to her children is a very important activity together, an important, meaningful ritual that the family can share. Because the children would realize, oh, So I'm not the only one feeling that way. So now they feel closer to one another while they are sharing, while the mother is sharing her fears to her children. And in that way, she opens also an opportunity for the children to be able to share also how they're feeling. Many times the children would just, they would look at their role models. If the parents are not talking about their feelings, the children wouldn't want to share their feelings too. But if they hear their parents sharing how they feel about this pandemic, then that gives them a go signal that it's okay. I can also share how I'm feeling. And they become closer to one another in that particular meaningful ritual. In fact, there was even a question who was asked by one of my students who's now working as a guidance counselor. And he was saying, before even helping the children, they need to help the teachers, their fellow teachers, because they're also stressed at the moment. I said, definitely, the the counselor should help first the teachers, because how can the teacher listen to their students if they themselves are also feeling stressed out, feeling anxious, feeling even depressed because of this pandemic. So as counselors, we can also reach out to the teachers so that the teachers in turn can reach out to the students
Mhm.
as we reach out also to the families.
Yeah. Mhm. Thank you, Father.
Yes.
Here again, this one is another one. Father, how about those families wherein the parents are frontliners? How
Yes.
can their caregivers promote family rituals with the children and the parents who are serving?
Yes. I was watching one of the um, reports on that was created on TV and online. Um, what this frontline peace givers, what they did was they would go so that the child go to the front yard of their house so that the children could see them. But they would feel that the children, the more that, especially the young ones, they don't understand why their father or their mother are not hugging them anymore. So they became very creative. What they did was to put a plastic. They put a plastic on, and then they hug the little girl or the little boy, and so they feel that yeah, it's not the same, but it doesn't mean that you are not loved anymore. So there could be creative ways of doing it. Like a friend of mine who is also a frontline medical worker. Uh, Whenever he's home, well, after cleaning himself, he would dance. In fact, I was just watching that the father and the daughter. The daughter is the one leading the dance steps. The daughter is around maybe 6 or 7 years old. She would lead the dance, and the father, who is a medical frontliner, at the back would follow. And they made a video, and they were showing the video. And a friend of mine was saying, "The father, don't post it because I might lose my patients. They might trust me anymore after seeing how I danced." But that was a very important ritual
Yeah.
that the
Mhm, mhm,
child enjoyed with the father, even if the father is busy the whole time there as a medical frontline worker.
mhm, mhm. Thank you, thank you.
Yes.
More questions. Sige, uminom muna kayo, Father.
Yes.
Uh,
Sorry.
um,
After
um,
top time, meron
no,
kasi
no,
akong allergy.
that's good. That's good.
Yes.
Okay, here. Here. With regards to spiritual rituals as a family,
Yes.
watching mass together through live mass,
Yes.
praying the rosary too would
Yes.
do. What are the other things you would suggest?
Well, part of the family ritual, religious ritual, you mean?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Spiritual rituals.
One of the religious ritual that I would remember in my family, we would have this the 6 o'clock. I remember as a young boy in our town at 6 o'clock the bell is rung, and literally the members of the community would stop doing whatever they're doing during that bell. So as a family, I would remember that's the time that would signal that we have to come home. So it's a time that we would pray together as a family. My mother would lead, or it's either me as I'm the eldest of the children, I would lead, or my father would lead, depending on who's assigned for that particular day. So my mother and father, they would give us assignments. Who will be the prayer leader for this particular day? So we take turns in leading the prayers, and that's an important ritual. Another ritual that I would remember is when I would bedtime, when I would be in the bedroom of my parents. We have this calendars, the old calendars. In the olden days, calendars would have those prayers in it. So my mother would be teaching me how to read using the prayers in the calendar. And it's not just teaching me to read, but I was learning how to pray using those calendars. So it's a bonding between me and my mother and also my other siblings. We would take turns in reading. Without us knowing it, we're able to memorize the prayer that sometimes, because we have already memorized it without even looking at it, we can recite. We can recite already what is written there on that calendar. And so my mother would put another calendar, the next page of the calendar, and then go through another prayer. And then after some time, we start memorizing those prayers. So it was a happy bonding of teaching us to read, and without us knowing it, it is also teaching us how to pray. So there are three birds in one session: family ritual, family bonding, the children, us learning how to read, and also us learning how to pray.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Father, there's a follow-up question to that.
Yes.
It's how do you handle resistance of teens to rituals of that sort, in spiritual rituals,
Yes.
attending online mass, for example,
Yes. I
thinking that
mentioned
they need they need that
yes.
value.
Yes. I mentioned earlier that sometimes rituals become very rigid. And when it's very rigidly imposed on the
Mm-hmm.
members of the family, then they start reacting to it. So I guess it's important for the parents to be able to realize that, in as much as the parents are so excited to pass on a very important tradition, without realizing it, the way it was imposed, the way the process that is being done, had created a negative impact on the children. So rather than imposing it, like I was mentioning about the rosary during when in my earlier years, my mother was able to find a new way, like the reading of the calendar, teaching us to read, but without us knowing it, it's also praying at the same time. I mentioned also earlier that we take
Mm-hmm.
turns in leading the prayer. So whoever is the prayer leader will be able is it's upon him or her to choose what form of prayer. Well, as young children, we wanted to have the shortest so that we can play again afterwards. But somehow, we looking back now, it was my introduction on how to lead in prayer. Even if I chose the shortest prayer, but I learned how to lead the family in praying as a young boy. And each one of us taking turns in praying. And it becomes a pleasurable experience for us. It's not something that we do not like it. the negative impact of the imposition of prayer disappeared, because we are now free to be able to choose the prayer that we like, that we would lead the family to prayer, and we can also choose the the place where we would pray together as a family. So it the creativity was enhanced in the members of the family. That later on, when I was in the seminary, I didn't feel that when we would have creative prayers or liturgy, it was almost not natural for me, because I have experienced that in the family, that we would be assigned. So when back in the seminary, when we would have creative liturgies, I would have a lot of ideas because of the experience that I had with my family.
Yes, Father.
Mm.
Here's another question
Yes.
about um, here. What best family rituals at home could you suggest to ease boredom
Boredom.
and frustration among our millennials and Gen Z generation, or maybe
The one
Gen
that I
X
mentioned a while
generation?
ago, the TikTok,
Yeah,
our
that's right.
millennials, they like doing that. So
That's
my
good,
brother
Father.
and my sister-in-law, they were just following. It was my nephew, no, my niece who was leading it. They would just follow the movements, and then they recorded it in the TikTok, and it became a meaningful ritual for them. Uh, my brother was not familiar with the TikTok, but then he was also learning from my from my niece, from his daughter, right, leading the TikTok, and it's an activity that was meaningful. At the same time, they're happy doing it, and it's a time that they bond and they shared it to us. So even those among us who were not there, we we would laugh at the way they did their TikTok together. That's what I can think of right now.
Yeah.
I see a
Yeah.
lot
Yeah.
of those posted now online, where
Mhm.
family members are involved, including, as I said, with my brother's family, including their dog. Using doing the same movements. Of course, they're manipulating the the feet of the dog to
Yeah.
simulate the dance steps that they are doing.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good idea.
Yes.
Here's another one, Father. Now, a lot of our students are having a troublesome relationship right now with their parents. But
Yes.
after they reach out and hear their parents, they realize how important they are to them.
Yes.
Now is there a ritual that the more the family argues,
Uh-huh.
the more they understand and bond with each
Mhm.
other?
Yes. Well, arguments are, well, it's a two-edged sword. Arguments could either bad or it could either be good.
Good,
But definitely
constructive.
nothing is resolved if they would just keep quiet. So maybe in the beginning there will be strong emotions because it's the first time to be able to express themselves. But after the strong emotions are out, then now they will be able to talk in more respectful way, after bringing out in catharsis all those strong emotions. And I guess the guidelines, they just have to um, set up guidelines, like in the marriage encounter in the earlier days when I would be the team priest. There are certain guidelines, like for example, um, when one is talking, the other one should just listen, or there are no grave digging, no bringing out of stick to the subject matter. Don't bring out the matters of the past. Stick to the subject matter, and no below the belt comments. So they can just make their own protocols on how the ritual can be done, and they agree together on those protocols and those procedures, so that the sharing of negative feelings or the sharing of strong feelings can be well facilitated, that they are within the protocol that they have made up together as a family.
Father, I think there's Francis would like to read
Okay.
a question.
Yes, Francis.
Yes, Father, how about let's check again. Yung follow up on our students who are not comfortable with their families and
Yes.
yes, and their family rituals
Yes.
since they are not in same location because of the lockdown. So how can we do about this?
Okay. I was just facilitating a particular uh, case of a 20-year-old guy and his uncle, right? Because the 20-year-old guy wanted to go home to the province, but he didn't realize that this pandemic would last long. So now that he, he realized that classes wouldn't continue and he wanted to go home, and he was so angry that he's not able to go home. But so it created a lot of stress on this particular 20-year-old guy, and he is now blaming his uncle for not uh, for not allowing him to go home. But the uncle was saying, "Yeah, but we have been trying our best so that you can go home." But they're in Cebu, so there are a lot of cases of pandemic COVID cases in Cebu. So they're also very strict. I was talking to the uncle last night, and he was saying, "Yeah, we tried today, but we had to go through the bureaucracy of getting permit from the local mayor of the place where they are, but they have to cross the bridge because they're in Lapu-Lapu City in Mactan. They have to cross to Cebu, and then Cebu is requiring that they will have to have clearance from Cebu itself. So they have to line up again because there are a lot of people who were also asking to be given a clearance to be able to go home and travel. And then he has also medical clearance, only to find out the medical clearance it was taken Monday, but it was already Wednesday yesterday. He was told, no, the medical clearance has to be during the day. So he has to go again. So what I'm trying to say here is he is separated from his family. That's why the stress is very strong. So what this uncle did while we're doing counseling, one of the things that he did was he he did Zoom with the parents. The parents of this boy is in Surigao, in Mindanao. So they would use the gadget, so the cell phone. They would contact. They would have a video calls, so that the boy would feel that even if they're separated by distance, they're still together. And then the parents were kept assuring the boy that we're doing our best. We tried to make already arrangements here in Surigao so that when you come home, you can be accepted immediately from the boat, because now there are no boats available. The only boats available are those that would bring goods. So there are no passenger boats at the moment. So their chance would be to be able to ride in those boats that carry all those provisions or things to be sold in Surigao. So that's it's non-passenger boat, but it's a commercial boat that carries a lot of things. So that's how they were hoping to be able to take that boat by Friday to Surigao. So meantime, the conversation is being facilitated by this uncle, because this boy has an issue with his father. Well, the father apparently he caught the father having an affair, and so he was angry with his father, and the anger with the father is projected to this uncle at the moment. So he was also angry with his mom because the mother seemed not not strong enough to confront the father or the infidelity, but what all this anger that he has with his father and his mother are now directed to this uncle who he feels now is not allowing him to go home, without realizing it's not the uncle who's not allowing him to go home. It's the situation. And um, the uncle had to show to him that he is doing his best to be able to connect. So apparently, from my when I had a video counseling last night with the uncle was saying the boy now, the 20-year-old nephew now is more stable, right? I had to take medicines. Now he's more stable, and he's now communicating with the father and the mother using gadgets facilitated by him, because the uncle is the brother of the mother. So he's the brother of the mother of the boy. So it was through him that they were able to communicate, open the lines of communication. The boy now, the 20-year-old guy, is now able to talk with his father. He's able to talk with his mother, even if there was anger in the beginning. And they were hoping that when they arrive, if they are able to push through on Friday, that this uncle would somehow stay, because he cannot go down. Well, apparently he has to go back immediately, so that he's not allowed to enter Surigao, because Cebu is they have a lot of cases in Cebu, so he has to also wait for the boat in the evening to come back. So they arrive in the morning, come back in the evening, so he has a lot of time, but he cannot go down. So what he was planning to do is to facilitate more conversations together with the father and the mother of this nephew of his, so that whatever they have already built up during the online video calls, he can follow through while he's there. He has nowhere to go anyways. He will have to stay on the boat and wait for the boat to come back in the evening. So he was planning to follow it through, that conversation that had already happened between father, mother, and the boy. It was well, as we say, the COVID-19, it's like bad luck, good luck, who knows, this pandemic was able to heal those hurtful feelings in the past. It wasn't easy, of course, in the beginning, because the boy had started to project on the uncle all his anger towards the father. But it was helpful. Well, in the beginning, the uncle was feeling also bad that the boy would shout at him and curse him, because he was so frustrated he cannot go home. But the uncle realized, yeah, all this anger of this boy is not actually for him. It's just that it is just projected on him, because he's not able to talk to his father. But now that he's able to talk to his father, he is now able to talk to his uncle now. So the uncle and the boy are already well, in good terms, as well as the boy and the father and the mother. So it was an opportunity for them to be able to thresh out things, hurt feelings in the past, even if they're in far place. One is in Cebu, the others are in Surigao. They're in Mindanao, and now they are able to talk together. They're able to forgive one another of things that happened in the past. So it's possible that this pandemic could also bring about
Sure.
connections and
Yes, yes.
heal memories
True.
of past hurts.
Very true, Father.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you've been answering so many questions. Maybe this would be the last question, Father.
Yes.
Always because of it's more about college students who have
Yes.
been separated from their families, who are now
Yes.
in dormitories.
Yes.
And the question is this: because of this separation, their parents are they're separated from their parents. Would you suggest for the college counselor to initiate regular online meetings as complementary to family rituals, with most, if not all of them, to make them feel that they are not alone in their own dormitories, or they are not the only ones experiencing that situation?
Well,
Why
definitely.
and why not? Thank you.
Definitely, it could be an opportunity for group counseling. So I would say suggest that the counselor can gather those students who were stranded. They cannot go home. They're in the dormitory. So the counselor, the whoever is assigned, can do a group counseling so that these
Or an
students,
online
college
also.
students would, oh yes, online. These college students would feel, oh, I'm not the only one feeling this way. My other companion here in the dormitory, they are also feeling the same way. So he would not feel, or she would not feel, that she's feeling strange, that all of them are feeling the same way. There's fear, there's a lot of boredom, there's a lot of uncertainty. So they will not be feeling alone. They would not feeling strange that I'm the only one experiencing this this feeling. And so if it's facilitated by the counselor, um, it becomes an opportunity for them to be able to feel that, oh, after all, I'm not the only one. Then they are able to connect. So they're able to go beyond the fears. They're able to build a community, a new family with the with those people who are stuck with them in the
Yes, that's true.
dormitory. And I guess it's a yes for me, because that's the only way to be able to reach out. Counselors would be able to reach out to these people who are stuck in the dormitory.
So let's go for the counselors. Let's be creative in reaching out
Yeah.
to our students, our clients.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I will pass now mic to Mr. Sir Francis.
Francis.
Yes, Doc Julian. Thank you very much, Father Arsie, for this wonderful and comprehensive uh, sharing
It's a
and
pleasure.
facility. Yes, you're welcome, Father. And also to Doc Julian, thank you also for co-facilitating this webinar series.
Yeah.
Now, uh, I'll be posting the post-evaluation link to our participants, where you can answer your post-evaluation. And we would like to remind our participants and the general public that every Tuesday and Thursday, the PGCA is having a free webinar. So for next week, May 26th, we will have another webinar on the PFA, and on the 28th. So please stay tuned for our posters and for our announcements. And for those who would like to seek mental health services, please approach our different chapters and different counselors who might be able to assist you with your concerns, especially in this pandemic. So with that, uh, thank you very much for attending this webinar, and see you soon, and see you on Tuesday. So thank you very much.